Hi everyone, this is Dr. Vishal Sharma of Moderator Inc. and of course Group Moderator and Manager of the Carrier Ethernet Group. And I am really excited to bring you this Network Architecture and Design Series video today, which is going to talk about the key takeaways that came out of the TC3 Summit, which is the Telecom Council's Carrier Connections Conference that happened in Silicon Valley just last week. Now, as some of you might know, the TC3 is a two-day event and is designed to connect the carriers or telcos with system vendors, software providers, app developers, essentially anybody that is in the carrier ecosystem that is engaged with carriers, wishes to do business with carriers, and so forth. And it's a two-day jam-packed event which has a solution showcase where new solutions and joint solutions are showcased, and it has the conference track where discussions and panels go on. And today I'm going to bring you the 9 key takeaways that came out of this year's event, which is essentially a summary of the end of the day takeaways that Derek Kerton and John Feland, who are the two master of ceremonies, if you will, together with Liz Kerton of this event. And they had a fantastic back and forth at the end of day 2 and also at the end of day 1. And what I'm going to bring you are the key takeaways that I got out of that discussion. So before I do that, let me do a quick screen share so we can talk about what we are going to be talking about. So here it is. It's the Telecom Council Carrier Connect Summit event. And thanks are, of course, due to Derek Kerton and John Feland, whose key takeaways I'm actually summarizing here in my own words. And for those of you that don't know Derek and John, here's a photograph of Derek and John, who I call the energetic duo, doing a back and forth at the end of day 1, and they did a very similar thing at the end of day 2. And what we are going to learn are the key takeaways from the 2 days of the conference. Now, the way I'm going to do this, guys, is I'm going to list for you the 9 key takeaways first without really explaining what they are. And then I'm going to go off and go down the list one by one and give you a little bit of insight into why that takeaway matters and how the takeaway came about and some explanation behind the scenes. So let's get started. So what did we learn from TC3 this year? Well, there were 9 key takeaways, like I said, and here's the first one. So dialogue trumps monologue. Number 2, the carrier representatives in Silicon Valley have gone native. And I'm going to explain all of these as we go through them a little bit later. Following an existing telco lowers risk, coverage over content, customer experience trumps all, value first, revenue second. Consumer apps need stable platforms, which aren't there yet. Making the network high performance, surprisingly, is key. And carriers need apps that actually use more data. And we'll talk about why that's the case. So there you have it. Those are the 9 key takeaways from the TC3 Summit. And let me go over them one more time. Dialogue trumps monologue. Carrier representatives in Silicon Valley have gone native. Following an existing telco lowers risk, coverage over content, customer experience trumps all, value first, revenue second, consumer apps need stable platforms, making the network high performance is key, and the carriers need apps that use more data. So now what does this really mean? And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and come back and share with you my notes and my learnings. So let's look at the first one, dialogue trumps monologue. So what we mean by that is that to enhance the consumer experience, which is fundamentally more important for carriers today, they are willing to engage in a dialogue with their consumers, with their customers, as opposed to a monologue where either the carrier reps or the consumer is the only one talking. So that's a key takeaway. The second is there have been over the last few years a number of carriers that have set up shop in Silicon Valley to scout for new technologies, to scout for partnerships, to scout for young companies that are doing innovative applications and developments that would fit into the development plans of carriers worldwide. And some, of course, have had that establishment for the last 15 years, such as Swisscom and BT, but many others, such as Deutsche Telecom and so on, have come on the scene only in the last few years. And the way the carrier representatives have had to work is that they have to actually remain bicultural, which means for them to be a useful intermediary between the telco head office, which is usually in a different country, and Silicon Valley, they have had to adopt a little bit of both cultures. And so Silicon Valley requires them to dress and talk as we do here in the Valley. As you know, it's pretty casual culture. Whereas when they're back in the head office, they have to be dressed professionally and interacting professionally, adhering to the customs of the native country. Now, why is that important? The reason that's important is that over time, many of these local offices have built a brand of their own within the central office, within the head office. And as a result, they can more easily take ideas and companies and innovative thoughts from here in Silicon Valley to their head offices and have those ideas be heard, have them sort of get a listening, which allows a much better interaction between the new companies and the ecosystem players that are looking to talk to these huge carriers and the carrier HQ. So as a result, the takeaway for the new companies in the Valley is that when they're looking for partnerships, it might be useful to look at telcos that have had a presence here and that have a good track record of success at the HQ level, namely that have built that, the trust and built that reputation in their HQs by remaining bicultural in their interactions with these two worlds, Silicon Valley and the telco HQ. The next thing is that following an existing telco lowers risk. So that kind of explains the behavior of telcos to look at their competition, look what the competition is doing and follow that. So that's not just the herd mentality that we talk about. Derek calls it being the lemurs, but really what it is that following an established telco is a way for other telcos to lower their own risk. If you see the established telcos follow a certain path, who have a lot more resources and a lot more capabilities than you do, and you see them doing something, you get to learn from that experience. So it's not merely a herd mentality. It's a mentality that's come out of sort of economic requirements and good old-fashioned common sense. The fourth one is coverage over content. What does this mean? What this really means is that coverage of the network-wide coverage of a region, of an area, of a nation, as the case may be, depending on the extent of the carrier, is key. For example, there is really no user experience without coverage. And even though you want user experience to be the ultimate thing, and it is, it really does not function by itself in the absence of nationwide coverage. And a good example of that in this conference came from EE's Mansoor Hanif, who was the ex-CEO of EE and now is responsible for the entire wireless RAN strategic rollout. And what Mansoor said was that their CEO today has laid down one of the three principles of their network expansion as 100% coverage. And the way they achieve this is by using partners such as a startup called Parallel Wireless out of Boston, which have developed a nice macro cell technology which allows EE to build a macro cell network by connecting small cells one after the other in a mesh topology, as opposed to using other means of satellite and so on for extending network coverage, which are a lot more expensive. So they've come up with a cost-effective macro cell network coverage strategy, which allows EE to extend its network to areas where there is low coverage. Now, of course, in very remote areas where satellite-based coverage and small cells are enough, they'll of course do that. But in more urban or semi-urban areas, they extend coverage by carpeting the coverage area with the small cell network coming from Parallel Wireless gear. And even though coverage extension is not always profitable, the reason it's valuable to do that is that it helps to build the brand. And so that is what players like EE in the UK have been doing. And in fact, if you look at the strategy that the Verizons and AT&Ts in the US had a few years ago, if you recall all the ads where they would show the network coverage, the blue dots and the red dots and so forth, it was really an attempt at exactly the same thing, to show and prove to the consumer, the end customer, that they have the most extensive coverage that is possible. And that's because content comes second. If there is no coverage, you really cannot even have the user do anything with the content. The fifth one is customer experience is paramount. Okay, that trumps all. And what the reason that's important is that the operators today are competing with the likes of Apple and Google Fi that are building out their own networks. So they are butting head with the network operators at the network operations level. Therefore, it's extremely important for operators to think about what the ultimate end customer experience is going to be like, because that dictates how they fare against the new players like Google Fi and Apple. The sixth one is value first, revenue second. So the idea here was that you have to create value to get revenue. So you can start with some original value and then you add on to that, and that then leads to revenue rather than the other way around. For example, if you look at an app company like Mojio, all right, they basically extract data from cars, and they do that through a very simple interface, unlike many other companies that require an expensive dongle to do that. And they allow the user access to all of their vehicle data. And if you go to the Mojio website, you'll see that they have a number of different apps which can extract engine diagnostics. It can track your driving habits. It can give you trip reports. It can give you updates about and recalls, information about recalls that may have happened for your vehicle, or things that you may be eligible for from the manufacturer because certain kinds of repairs have been authorized free of cost and so forth. And they've built little apps for each of these different functions. And they provide you value initially by giving you access to this data, enabling you to see how you can utilize those apps. And then there are backend functions built into the apps that they charge you for and that the user is happy to pay for because they've already received value. So they adhere to this principle of giving value first and looking at revenue second. And then the same thing, of course, extends to the operators that are using apps like Mojio and others to offer services to their end consumers. The seventh on the list is that stable platforms are the need of the hour for building apps for the consumer. So today, the operators feel that not all of the platforms on which apps need to run are stable enough. And of course, that is a problem because that leads to dissatisfied users, a not so optimal consumer experience, which is not what the operators want. So every single app requires a stable platform, and that's where the focus should be. So if you're a startup looking to work with an operator and you have a product or a service that is going to stabilize the platform and is going to give very stable service, then that's the way you would win the hearts and minds of the operators. Now, the eighth on the list is that improving network performance so that it's a high-performing network is key. Now, this actually is counterintuitive because you would think that with the loss of ARPUs and the competition from the OTT operators, improving and investing in network performance would be a counterintuitive thing because it's a cost. However, we saw in two cases, in the case of EE and Telstra, we saw that the idea for both of these operators was that they would create a network that is so good that it attracts the OTT players to go through what they call the middle of the network as opposed to over the top. So the idea here is that the OTT players would partner with the operator and would actually use the services of the operator to give a more optimal experience to the end customer than would be possible if they simply use the network operator's pipes as dumb pipes. And a great example of that in the conference was between Spotify and Rogers in Canada. Now, what Rogers has done is they built a relationship with Spotify to bundle Spotify's music streaming service together with the Rogers subscription service. Now, what that results in is, hypothetically at least, Spotify can perform network optimization together with Rogers and offer a better consumer experience and thereby maybe beat a Pandora to the market. And this is an example where the OTT operator is partnering with the network operator and is actually allowing the network operator to be a part of its streaming media delivery service. And the way that might work is the following. So for example, if there was congestion in the Rogers network, there might be communication between Rogers and Spotify that would request Spotify to reduce the rate at which it's streaming its music to all its users on the Rogers network. Now, the end result of this would be that every user would have a uniform quality delivered. And so the benefit for Spotify would be that the end consumer experience is much better, and therefore they experience Spotify service to be better than somebody else's service that is simply using the operator pipe as a dumb pipe. And the benefit for Rogers is that network utilization and network performance overall improves because they're collaborating with Spotify because of the fact that Spotify is, in quotes, going through the middle of the network as opposed to going over the top. And a very great example of this is between Uber and Bharti Airtel in India, where Uber has partnered with Bharti Airtel as a distribution partner in the country. So the problem Uber had in India, for example, was that not everybody uses credit cards, and Uber required credit cards to use its service. So they really needed a payment mechanism that was more ubiquitous, especially where the large majority of people who may use their service don't still have credit cards. So what they did is they partnered with Bharti to use their mobile-based payment solution for the cab service, which is a great example of, again, an over-the-top operator using the middle of the network, namely an application that is inherent to the Bharti network as a key part of its service, and therefore for, again, using customer experience. Now this gives Uber a huge customer base that normally they wouldn't have access to because that customer doesn't have credit cards, but those customers do have access to Bharti's mobile payment solution through their mobile phones. So these are examples where OTT players have worked in partnership with the operators using the middle of the network. And then finally, what we've seen is that a few years back, if you recall, there was a data tsunami on the horizon. The Cisco VNI was predicting petabytes and zettabytes of data. And in preparation for that, the operator actually took a lot of steps. What they did is they put in place measures like HETnets, spectral efficiency, 4G, LTE, and so on. And what this resulted in is that minimized the impact of the data explosion, to the point that today actually we are reversed. Today the operators are asking users to use apps that have a lot of data. And the reason is that the carriers know that if they want to participate in the data ecosystem, they really need apps that use a lot of data, so they can develop relationships with the OTT operators that are symbiotic relationships, are mutually beneficial relationships, where the OTT operator gets better quality, the actual telco operator gets better network performance and a share of the revenue, and so it's a win-win for all. And of course, the end consumer gets a better user experience and a much wider reach of the OTT operators' applications, because the relationships that the telco operator has with the end consumers are used very effectively. So there you have it. The top 9 key takeaways from TC3 this year, brought to you courtesy of Derek Kerton and John Feland, who actually did the summary at the end of the day. And I'm delighted to kind of bring you the key takeaways. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please share your comments and inputs. You can always write to us at our website or our Google Plus page or on my LinkedIn group, or you can write me directly at v.sharma@ieee.org. So thanks for watching, and until next time, take care, and may the bits in your bytes and the bytes in your packets be profitable. Bye-bye.